hello, and you are greeted just by me because I have been abandoned by everyone else on the team. Um, and look, that probably doesn't matter given that currently we have 0 people watching. So that's interesting. Like I said, I've been abandoned by everyone. I think let me just scroll. What did Alex said he'd do? He'd bench pressed about 3 elephants or something and was too tired. I know he'd been doing some renovating, catching up, replastering a fireplace. I swear that house never ends for him. And Rob is AWOL, if anyone knows where he is. And Jeremy, I think, is off with some appointments and things. So you are just stuck with me. So I will apologise for that in advance. So if anybody has any questions, please drop them in the comments, either on the YouTube stream or the Facebook, and we can discuss them. And there's my man, Piram. Thanks, thanks, mate. Howdy to you too. And hopefully we get some things to talk about tonight. I am stretched thin this morning, so hopefully, trying to cover for people that have COVID and things out of my staff. So I'll just get that stupid bloody degree out of the picture. Who wants that? So I've just had a message from Jefferson, and yes, I am going to get Jefferson on, a friend of the show. So let's get him on. I will just be a moment. Invite, copy, and hopefully he will join us in a moment. But I did have a question from Dave Fanning, straight up, who you might see me frequently smash on battle reports. He started with describe your perfect date. Well, I don't do those anymore, mate. I'm married. I don't get any dates. What are you talking about? But then the first one would be, what should Mantic produce next? Which is a really interesting question for mine, because there is so much they could do. So to me, I am torn between them filling out existing ranges or redoing an old range. I love some of their new IP. I love Night Stalkers. I love Halflings. I like Basilia from an IP point of view, although some of the old models are quite dated now. So yeah, but what I would probably start with is I think it's a massive turnoff if people can't, when they go to a website, they build an army. If they can't build the whole army, then I think that's a turn off. So I would be starting with filling in gaps in their model range. If anyone thinks anything differently to that, please let us know. And what army would I revamp? And Dave gives the example of kill off dwarves and make a Mantic IP version. That'd be hard. I think dwarves are pretty iconic, so I'm not entirely sure you could do an easy revamp. I would certainly do a revamp of the ranges of things like elves and dwarves, though. We saw some awesome stuff in Vanguard for the dwarves, and I think if we had a revamp that looked more like that would be ideal. And I think moving forward, they probably have a little bit of an opportunity for that, but it all comes down to cost. I would definitely redo the elf range. I think there's space for those ranges that are iconic fantasy tropes as well as IP armies. I think ideally Mantic want to build their own IP, which is good. That is worthwhile, and I think it's certainly worth doing from a model perspective. But having some of those tropes is still worthwhile as well. Yeah, Adrian, good morning to you. You must be about 2 hours behind me, so it'd be about 8:20 a.m. in the morning if I'm not mistaken for you. I agree. They're just yeah. I don't think the dwarves are their worst range by any stretch, but I think there's worse, but I'd still love a little bit of a revamp towards that Vanguard. And here we have Aram.
Hey there! Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you very well. I think you've got a better
Wonderful.
than I do right now, so you're coming through really well.
Yeah, I'm in my podcast studio.
Yeah, nice. Well, what's your podcast?
Right now my podcast is Print Your Games, which is a
Hmm.
podcast all about 3D printing for tabletop gaming.
Hmm. Interesting, which is a conversation you and I have been having recently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, so tell us about yourself. So I think we had you on the show for a resin printing episode, right? But that was
Yeah, ages
that was quite
ago.
some time ago. Yeah. So
Yeah,
why don't you
yeah.
kind of give yourself a bit of a reintroducing it,
All right.
or reintroducing yourself and telling us about yourself.
All right. Well, I am Jefferson J. Thacker. I am also known as Param. I am a longtime podcaster in the gaming space, formerly of No Direction, which was the premier Pathfinder podcast. We worked a lot with Paizo and hosted a lot of their conventions. And now I'm semi-retired, but also I have my Print Your Games podcast, which I'm enjoying quite a well, and I am doing marketing work for game companies that I will not name for friendly reasons.
But despite that, like from seeing your posts, you have quite a bit of love for Kings of War,
I
Param.
do. I really do love Kings of War. I came in with third edition, like
Hmm.
just as it launched, and then COVID happened, so I had to teach myself how to play. Mainly because my little sister wanted to get into a war game, so we went
Hmm.
shopping around, and Kings was getting talked up, so we decided to give that one a try, and I kind of just fell in love with it. And it was also right when I got my resin printer, so I ended up printing probably most of the armies that exist
Hmm.
in Kings of War by this point.
You certainly are a prolific printer. Do you have a favorite manufacturer for the SDLs, or it just varies depending on what you're wanting to print?
It really depends. I'm a little bit biased because Last Sword is probably my favorite, but for my elves. They
Hmm.
also do a wonderful, wonderful Kingdoms of Men set of proxies that are also lovely.
Hmm.
And a lot of like chaosy themes for the Warhammer fans.
Hmm.
I'm biased because they sculpted a me as one of their models, so it kind of influences my.
That's
I'm
awesome. I
I'm the
think.
captain of the archer troop that you can get from them right now.
Okay, and so this is Last Sword Miniatures, correct?
Yes, yeah.
Yep, so I'm just jumping on their store now, and we might bring some up, but I'll just put a couple of comments up while we're waiting. Thanks, Paige or Gad, whoever's controlling that today. But yes, I think maybe we should rename it the Tuesday morning, given everyone else always bails. And g'day, Paul. Hope you're doing well. Last Sword, where are they from? Because I just got, I think, a Spanish
They think
something
they're from
Spanish pop
Italy.
up. Oh, okay, yep.
Mhm.
So I'm going to share this screen so we can see that. So these are very nice models.
Right. I've
Share screen.
Gosh, let me grab some because I've painted hundreds of their models.
Yeah, so we can see the individual detailing. Um, it's not going to blow up big for some reason. Oh, there we go.
Mhm.
Yeah, so they've got a nice range of models that looks like across
Mhm.
a few different fantasy armies.
Mhm. Oh yeah, they've got their form ones are lizard men, chaos, humans, and elves right now. They have
Got
like a
it?
really ridiculously good wood elf set that they did as sort of a Kickstarter, which is
Hmm.
basically become all my Sylvan kin have been from that Kickstarter.
Okay. Oh wow. All right.
Yeah,
Let's see if we can
and
hold that up.
hold on. Yeah, I've let's see here.
That's
It
right,
will
because you tend
focus.
to print on the round bases too, don't you? And then just put them into
Yeah,
structured
well,
bases.
yeah. It started because like I'm my main hobby was role playing, so like a
Hmm.
lot of Pathfinder stuff, and so like everything's on 1 inch bases there, and I wanted to get double use out of my models,
Mm,
so I put them on round bases and then magnetized them, and I designed my own uh, little trays to
mm,
just snap them into in the correct Kings of War sizes. And
mm.
I think it looks really cool. And I know like not everybody's a fan of this method, but I think it looks really cool, and it gives me that like ranked up effect, like
Yep,
old Hammer look.
yep.
But you know,
Oh, I think it looks cool. And you've still got a fair amount of like that's a horde, and you've still got that looks like a good 24 models at least on there.
yeah, it's exactly 24 because
Mm,
it says that's it. It's literally I put them on there until I can't fit a single one more on,
yep.
which is how I designed them.
Mm.
I
And do
ended up like
you sorry, you go?
I ended up like designing like these for every permutation of of common base size. So
Mm,
like even like Lord of the Rings and bases and Conquest bases and Age of uh Song of Ice and Fire bases.
hmm
I've made conversions for that because I don't play any of those games, but because I started making these and putting the bases out for free, people kept
mm.
asking me, "Well, I have these weird Warhammer models. I need a base for them," so I ended up making them.
And do you print the base in resin as well, Param?
I used to print all my all the trays in resin, but I've started doing those in FDM, not because of cost reasons, but because FDM stays more dimensionally accurate.
Mm,
Because resin slightly shrinks because it's a liquid, it kind of slightly shrinks and warps a little bit as it's
yep.
curing, and then a little bit after it's done. Uh, to the point that I actually print this when I do print them in resin, I print them at 103% size so that they will shrink down to the actual size.
Mm, yep. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. And I think I remember you talking about your sister getting into gaming, that being a big thing behind resin printing for you. Yeah, that's
Hmm.
awesome. Um, because she has some difficulty around gaming, is that right? From what there's a story there,
Well,
about getting out and
yeah,
into the gaming scene.
she's got some physical difficulties, so not able
Hmm
to travel as much, not able to get out as much. So like yeah, it's just she keeps me company and keeps my games going here at home.
Yeah, nice. Yep. And
Mhm.
so you said you've printed almost every army
Uh,
that Mantic has.
yeah, pretty much. So I've actually had to pare down because I was running out of storage space, and I just started like, "Hey, here's an entire full army as
Mm.
presents for other people."
Yeah, nice. Um, and you said like you've got some favored manufacturers, but you tend to spread the love around a little bit.
Yeah, I do. Like some of my favorites are Artisan Guild, which I think that's everybody's favorites.
Hmm
Real Warcrafty style. Titan Forge is really great. I love their work. And Heroes Infinite has become a bit of an obsession lately for the fantasy stuff.
Mm. And how many Patreons do you subscribe to, or do you
Right
just buy
now,
what you want?
I do a lot of subscriptions to patrons, and right now I'm really well behaved that I keep my monthly budget under $150 in
Yeah, right.
Patreons.
Yep. So what? And that's US. So for us in Australia, that's probably more like 250. But that's really interesting, right? Because there's an argument.
Hmm.
Um, well, some people say an argument against printing is not contributing to games manufacturers, but here you are, you're giving up,
Hmm.
$1,200 a year at a minimum just in
Right.
Patreon, right? And
Right.
with the thing with the Patreon
Oh.
is that you're only getting the future models. If you want something for the past, sure, you'll get a discount code, but you throw more money at
Mhm.
them.
Indeed, and I've done that so much. Well,
Mm,
especially when I discover a new Patreon that's going that I didn't that wasn't on my radar, or I start a new project that I wasn't interested in last year. It's like I just recently decided, you know what? I need a Saurian, a salamander army. Uh, so oh crap, I got to go buy a whole bunch of back issue lizard men. I probably spent like 200-300 bucks on just STLs for
and
different
which
lizard
company did you
men.
go with for that?
One page rules. I do have to
Yep,
disclaimer, since I mentioned them, I do work for them.
yep,
But also Last Sword has some really great ones. Raven Twin and Artisan Guild had
yeah.
some good ones.
The other ones that I like that I'm so unlike you, I'm only a two Patreon member at the moment,
Hmm. Uh-huh.
which is Titan
Smart.
Forge, but
Hmm.
Lost Kingdom,
Lost
and
King. Oh yeah, I
yeah,
have
yeah,
most of their lizards too.
yeah,
But
yeah, they punch out some nice stuff. So
mhm,
um,
mhm,
yeah, they're my two favorites at the moment. I mean, I think you and I have a common belief. Then we've been doing a little bit of work together recently that we believe
mhm.
that Mantic really needs to move into this
Yeah.
STL space in
Yeah.
some form.
Mhm,
Not necessarily going the way of Titan Forge, and being all
mhm,
STL based,
mhm.
but that they really need to embrace this as a market. Would you agree?
I do agree because one of my biggest worries is that Mantic is actually one of the companies that's most vulnerable to the disruption that's coming into the space because, like, they exist as an alternative to some of the bigger options, but there's other alternatives coming up to challenge the king, and
Mm.
I'm really worried with their particular niche. I really am. I love this game so much, and I want it to continue and keep getting support and love. So I don't
And
want that to happen.
and I totally agree with that. I think
Mhm,
thanks, Alec, and you can, if you allow us on Facebook, we'll be able to see your name, Matt.
mhm,
But
mhm,
I think there's a natural thing in the gaming community to kind of say, well, Mantic is a competitor to Games Workshop, but they're not. No one is a competitor to Games Workshop in theory.
no,
Like when you go based on size, right? In
right.
like,
I said
if they,
alternative, not
yeah, yeah,
competitor.
yeah, exactly. But I
Mhm,
think a lot of people think in that competitor space. But
mhm,
I agree that Mantic's in a really difficult space where they're not big enough to withstand the disruption, right?
mhm,
So they need to be, but they have quite a bit of investment in trying to do it themselves.
mhm,
And so I think they're at that prime size where you're right. They are vulnerable to disruption. So they need to
right,
be part of the disruption. They
right.
shouldn't, they shouldn't try and ride it out.
So is they're in this weird awkward space, and you see this happen in the tech sector a lot too, where they're not so big they can just weather it and just
Mm,
take the losses, but they're big enough that it's hard for, like, and they have such ingrained investments and traditions that it's hard for those medium companies to make that turn, the agile
mm,
turn. Whereas, like, you look at somebody like Titan Forge, who was doing traditional manufacturing before and has
correct.
almost completely
Yep.
swapped over. And you can see the
Mm,
same with Puppets War, who did the same. Westphalia is dabbling in the space. Modifius is dabbling in the space. They haven't done a big conversion. No, only like some of the smaller ones have done the full jump.
mm.
Nobody of Mantic size has done it well, except for Privateer Press is playing with some interesting things lately.
Yeah, I would argue probably you're right that the biggest so far would probably be Titan Forge that has
Hmm.
just done that complete switch. I don't think other than old stock, I don't think they cast anything anymore.
Some of their
Um,
board games,
or
and
do
they
they?
do it in, but they do it in COcast now. They've
Yeah.
abandoned resin casting.
Well, and this is the thing about resin printing, right? The technology is moving so fast that like molds could be a thing of the past anyway. That you
Mm,
could see companies printing in volume. So I've got
right.
the Elegoo Jupiter coming, right?
Oh, it's a great printer. It's going to be
Yeah,
huge,
a
though.
big one, right? And so
Yeah,
like, I'm going to be able to print multiple regiments at a time if I
you're going
want
to
to.
be able to print an entire army at once, my dude.
Yeah, right. And so the thing is like I guess some people argue that the cost thing of printing for the home consumer, and sure you have to buy the printer, you have to buy the materials, but I don't think the cost is coming into it. The cost is minimized by the fact that people get to pick what the hell they want,
Mhm,
right? And almost any game's rule set now, like even if you're GW, almost any game's rule set is model agnostic because you can get the
mhm,
rules. You might have to buy their box set, but you can get
mhm,
the rules and play with what you want, right?
yeah.
Um, so you got to be part of it.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, rules can't be copywritten. That's part of the basics of copyright is game rules can't be copywritten to begin with, which is how
Mm,
you end up with sites like Wahapedia out there. Um, so it's a really tough thing to kind of force that as to force it. Plus, I play a lot of Kill Team at my local game store, uh, and they half the people there are with 3D printed armies right now.
well, the game store might care if they're not selling models, but otherwise, it's not like they're going to enforce it right because they want people in there to make an impulse purchase, right?
So my game store doesn't mind, because what we've found is we're not spending money on models as much as we used to, but I'm making it rain in paint and terrain and supply. Like,
Yep.
I'm gonna spend my hobby dollars. I'm gonna spend all my hobby dollars. Like, I
Mm,
can't help it. So, like, the money shifted away from one bucket and just straight into
mm.
another bucket. Like, my anime figure stack has gotten huge. So my game store does not mind when I show up for any reason. And as
And
long as
you
you treat
also
your game store with love, they're not going to care that you're bringing 3D printed models, as long as you're leaving them more profitable than when you left.
I totally agree, and I think part of that is also like some of the game stores are becoming part of the disruption. So they're
Mm-hmm.
buying 3D printers, and if someone
Mm-hmm.
says, "I bought the STL, can you please print it for me, just this one copy?" They're going to
Mm-hmm.
do it. They're going to
Yep.
do it, and they're going to charge them for it. And there's actually an avenue to revenue there. Because
Right.
a game store where you might not be able to afford, a few grand for a high-end printer, a game store might go, well, if I can service all my customers who bring me SDLs, yeah, I'll
Mm-hmm.
spend it and I'll print for you.
I mean, even you say a few grand for a high-end printer, even a top of the line can print better than plastic molding is capable of, which is
Mm,
true. 3D so this has changed since my old episode.
mm,
Modern 3D printers, like from the Mars 3 and up, from like the Saturn 2, the Mars 3, some later editions of the Mars 2, most of anything that's coming out new right now prints at a finer detail than it is physically possible for them to make those molds.
mm. Yep. Yep. And this is the thing with something big like the Jupiter, right? I mean, obviously you can get bigger than that, but
Mhm.
there's an option there for studios to have those
Mhm.
and print to
Yeah.
order
Yeah.
almost, you know?
Well, that's the privateer press model that they've jumped onto. And I've looked at some of the models. I was at Gen Con when they had them to show off, so I got to get and look at what they were
Hmm.
making. So privateer press, they're not selling the STLs yet. I don't know if that'll change, but what they're doing is instead of resin casting, instead of plastic molding or even CO casting, they've got a fleet of 3D printers, and they print to order what you order on and what they
Mm,
ship to the game stores.
mm,
And as an Australian, this
mm,
is good because they can license a printer in Australia to print for them and
mm.
send your material to you and not have to pay the ridiculous shipping nonsense.
Yep. Yeah, that is cool. And like that's a really good story of innovation, right? So
Mhm,
that's taking the STL thing and then like putting another
mhm.
layer in of
Right.
how to keep your business model going.
And
Uh,
this happened in the RPG market too. They started to print locally in different locations. Drive Through RPG has local printers where a lot of indie RPGs are printed through them, even if you buy them on the store shelf at your local game store. So, like the ones in Europe are printed in Europe, the ones in the States are printed in the States, and that way they don't have to do overseas shipping.
mm, yep. Yeah, wow. Um, I do want to ask you a question though. So
Hmm.
like as someone that knows, a wide range of the STL market. Let's just say Mantic could turn around tomorrow, which obviously they can't. Let's just say they could
Hmm.
say we can offer everything that's on our store in STL form.
Okay.
Would they cut it?
What do you mean? Uh,
As in, would they be able to compete? Like, yeah,
this their new stuff, yeah. Like not all like their old stuff, no. I mean, but there's a
mm,
market for janky old stuff too. Like there's intentionally, I don't mean that to be mean, but
yeah,
there is a market that people that love that old hammer look and
yeah,
like modern STL, like monstrous encounters. Like their entire business is they make the models that look like you remembered the old hammer looked like.
mm,
They look better, but like you don't
mm,
remember that they look so bad.
mm. Yeah, 100%. I,
But
I,
I
I
think
get that.
like yeah, from their Night Stalker range up, it looks pretty good. Like I'm not a fan of all their sculpts.
Mm,
I put my money where my mouth is. I've bought entire Mantic armies just to
mm,
show support for the company. Most of them are still sitting in the boxes, and I have no
mm,
intention of ever painting them.
mm.
But um,
Mm. I think you're right. Most of the stuff from there, I mean, for mine, probably some of the Rift Forge stuff doesn't cut the mustard. Like I like the
mhm,
Manticores, but like the Shrine and things like that.
yeah,
I think most of the Halfling stuff would cut the mustard and is
mhm,
also like an underdone space in the
yeah.
STL market.
Yeah, the only
Um,
alternative for there are actually very few. It's Duncan Shadow, Westphalia is doing a little bit, and then
mm,
that's it. There's like a few pieces in there. There's no cohesive halfling army other than Duncan Shadows
mm.
right now.
So I totally agree that I think some of their stuff would compete, but then you just have all this other stuff that like wouldn't,
Mhm,
right? Like their
mhm,
dragons would not compete. Their
mhm,
abyssal fiends would not compete.
mhm.
The phoenix would, I would say. There's not
Yeah, the
that
Phoenix
many
is
really.
really nice. I
Yeah.
that's the one Mantic model that I had to have just because it was awesome.
Mm. Yeah. I really like it. So I think there's plenty that would automatically complete. But this is the thing for me too, right? If they
Hmm.
went down an STL path
Hmm.
in some form, right? Maybe
Hmm.
not in complete form, but in some form, it makes it so much easier to refresh your range.
Yeah. Hmm.
You
And it.
keep your old stock, sell it if you can, but like it makes it so much easier to refresh your range to become
Hmm.
more competitive and offer a complete range, right?
Hmm.
So many of the ranges right now just have big gaping holes in them.
Right.
Um, and if you're a new player starting out and you sit there looking through the website and you're like, oh, right, I've built a list that I like. Oh, I can't get three of them. Well, then you're going to have to go elsewhere anyway.
Mhm. I kind of ran into it myself because, like, with a lot of the calls lately to like build a Mantic army, it's like, okay, I'm going to have one Mantic army. I'm going to build one.
Mm,
Just, support Mantic as a company. Time to build the army. I was like, I really like Northern Alliance, and
mm,
it's a Mantic IP. Nobody's really out there doing anything kind of like it. So I was like,
mm,
awesome. And I start building my list. I was like, I need a whole lot of Varinger, or is it not
mm.
Varinger? Hearst Carls. Hearst Carls. I need a whole bunch of Hearst Carls, and you can't buy those. They
Yep.
only get 10 in the Mega Army. I might have this wrong. It's one of the army boxes. You get
It's
10 of
something like
them,
that. Yeah.
and then you can't buy any. So, like, I want to buy a Mantic Army, but I literally can't.
Yep. Exactly. Or things like their snow trolls, I love at face value,
Mhm.
monopose, right?
Yeah,
But you
that
could
hurts.
stretch that. You could do three different models in a
Mhm.
monthly release. So Paul's brought up I suspect their concern is sharing of files, but you know what? In the end, that what it seems to
Mhm.
be is that is not standing up to a test. So something like
Mhm.
one-page rules, we went through the data, Perim, is that they've got almost 10,000 Patreons.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mhm.
So that's 120, and at $10 US, as their bottom tier, or their normal tier, that's 120,000 USD
That math's not
just from.
right.
Sorry.
That'd be $95,000.
Yeah, well, roughly 100 grand,
Mhm.
in USD a year just from
Mhm.
Patreon. So not including back selling, not including forward selling. The
Mhm.
fact is, and then a certain portion of those would probably still buy models for elsewhere. I just don't think it is
Mhm.
early, right? It is early, and I don't think a lot of that stuff is proved.
Mhm.
Yes, I agree that there could be some security issues there, but to me, if you're not part of the disruption, you get left behind.
So the piracy thing always makes me chuckle because, like, there's not a single industry that has gone digital that piracy has killed. And like, it
Mm,
didn't kill the movie industry, it didn't kill the music industry. Like, it forced some hands in the music industry for sure. And but I don't think that piracy is a problem, because the alternative for Mantic is that they just get left behind, because
mm,
let's face it, man, like, already, even before 3D printing in the space, a whole lot of people play Kings of War with Warhammer models, and even
yep.
new Warhammer models, not just old models you had in the basement. I look at these tournament reports you all are posting up, and it's like, wow, Age of Sigmar over everything. Like,
Mm,
modern Age of Sigmar stuff is in a lot of these tournaments. Um, and because of the model agnostic nature of the game, that's always going to happen. And so there's nothing in Kings of War that I can't find a STL file right now from somebody else willing to sell it to me that isn't as good or better than Mantic's offering, and that
yep.
I can get for
And
$10.
yeah, or from Mantic's point of view, even more. Like there's plenty of one-page rule
Mhm,
models that are 30 for the SDL, right?
mhm.
For
Yeah,
a super detailed,
yeah, the like
high-level
big
model.
Quetzalcoatl one.
Yeah, right.
It's
And
so good.
you compare that when you pay 60 or 70 for a hard model, but you've got the STL for life or something. I feel like the cost
Mhm,
return on that must be much better. Like obviously
mhm,
I don't know the numbers particularly.
mhm,
Um, but the other thing is that the current world is showing the subscription model works when it comes to success,
right.
right? That's not gaming. You look at any big software tech company in the
Mhm,
world, they're not selling you individual bits of software anymore. They're selling you
mhm,
subscriptions, right?
right.
Because you don't turn them off.
Microsoft Word used to be $200 at your local
Yep.
store, and they are happy to give it to you at $5 a month.
Yep. Exactly. Because they know you will keep paying it. right? You're
Mhm.
not going to, you probably, and then for that, you don't get a 6-year-old version on your PC. They're pulling data from you, they're
Mhm.
getting something back. Adobe's
Mhm.
doing it. Like, I know these are software examples, but
Mhm.
I think all you have to do is look at something like One Page Rules, who, yes, have a model system, but, sorry, a game system, but not as evolved as King's.
Mhm.
Um, is that there's 10,000 people paying a monthly subscription.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm,
And like I'll look at it as like total cost per customer, I think is a better
mm,
option of way to look at that because if you look at like I've been a patron of uh Artisan Guild since day one, which means I've paid them like almost $400 USD. How much money does Manta get per customer over that
yeah.
same period of time? When I
Yep.
was running a game store, Warhammer, we usually said every new Warhammer player is worth two big armies because that's usually what we get out of them before we lose them, and
Mm,
that's right around 400 or 500 bucks. So
mm.
about a similar.
Yeah, I think yeah, yeah, and I agree. And like the other thing is with STLs, you get so much impulse buy, right? I decided I
Yeah,
want that. I have so many STLs on my Google Drive that I'll probably never even look at. You
I've
would be
got.
the same. Yep.
I've had to
I mean,
buy a NAS because I
yeah,
can't even afford the Google Drive anymore. It's like 6 terabytes of models that I have not printed. I
yeah.
will happily, yeah.
I mean, and Paul's saying they're not a nimble technology company, which I agree with, but I don't think it takes a whole lot of nimble to pivot to an STL because you're talking about a designer, right?
Hmm.
You're talking about someone who's designing your models for you and that has
Right.
experience of turning it into STLs. You're
Hmm.
not talking about a big cost investment. Their cost
Right.
investment has been run and done. They
Hmm.
invested in resin factory, right?
Hmm.
Which they will still need to use because not everyone has access to a printer. Um, but I don't think it takes a big nimble pivot to start moving towards
Hmm.
STLs. And you might think Mantic's pretty big. They're about 20 to 30 employees. So they're also not so
Mm.
big that they can't do it.
Some of these companies I'm interviewing are bigger than that.
Yeah, right?
Hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
interview the STL, like the miniature companies in the 3D printing space. We do about 2 interviews a month, and like not most, a lot of people are just like 1 or 2 man teams, but then you end up with like Puppets War or Titan Forge or like I haven't interviewed OPR, but it's like these are huge teams that are bigger than Mantic, and
Yeah,
they can
yeah, yeah.
support that team
Mantic
on
is
this
is
model.
nowhere near as big as what people think. They're
Mhm,
punching well above their weight, which is a
mhm,
massive credit to them,
mhm,
right? But
mhm,
I don't buy the argument that they can't pivot. I don't buy that at all because I think what you're talking about pivoting into is a space
mhm.
that's not that hard to pivot
Yeah.
into.
And like what it solves is like the slowdown is uh the manufacturing slowdown because it's not designing the models. A good artist can design a brand new model from scratch in about 12 hours worth of sculpting work for like
Mm,
something super good and detailed is about on average that I'm seeing in my interviews. And so it's not the sculptor that is the roadblock, it's the getting these molds tooled, getting the whole shipments, the whole distribution pipeline in place, and all that goes out the window when you move into a
yeah,
digital environment.
I totally agree. It must be way harder to try and pivot into a new army, that is
Mhm.
cast. I mean, Mark's talking about software. I currently have a subscription model on my car, for it keeps my maps updated and does whatever
Mhm.
and talks to Elon. That's
Mhm.
already here. It's just it's subscription models work from a
Mhm.
profitability point of view.
The other thing is also like right now, Mantic is one of the pillar games that the 3D uh, printing community is rallying around.
Hmm.
It's like because they openly embrace people being able to use those models even in tournaments, and it's like Frostgrave, Oathmark, Mantic's, Kings of War, and then OPR is coming up in that range. And if they were to pivot and embrace it, they could capture they could basically crown themselves king.
Yep. I mean, OPR I think is a really interesting one because how long have they been around?
About more than 10 years, Oh,
Oh, so
14
it's a
years
similar time
actually.
frame to
Yeah.
Mantic. Yeah, okay.
A lot of the
Um,
same motivations, but from the
mm.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but we're talking about, a community that I had a quick look, 5,000 Facebook members, whereas Mantic have over 10,000.
Mhm.
I think there is, like you say, there is a community ripe for the picking.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
And and we've really only talked about Kings, not the sci-fi, not Armada, it's
Mhm.
just not Terrain Crate. There are so many
Mhm.
options now that
Right.
I think the money's there.
Yeah. I think the money's there, but I don't think they have forever to make the decision because
Correct.
I think somebody's going to pull that trigger, or somebody's going to come up through the 3D printing world and take that slot.
Mm.
And and basically, I think it's going to happen in the next couple of years. Is that whoever is going to be king of 3D printing will be crowned.
Yeah. Yep. I totally agree. And I mean, to me, which is an incredibly biased point of view, like Countercharge, we're pro Mantic most of the time.
Mhm.
Like we say our opinions, but very pro Kings of War. Like I believe we've got the tightest rule set game. A really well played rule set game. If you are matching King of Printing with a really tight game, well, you've got your willing market, and then you've got the others.
Mhm.
So you've got your own existing market of your game, but then you've
Mhm.
got the others that'll jump on board as well.
Right. Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, sorry. I'm unfortunately I have to purposely filter some of my things on this
Yeah,
one
yeah,
due to
yeah.
prior entanglements.
Yes, yeah, yeah, that's fine. I mean, what I guess what are some of the? I mean, part of the problem I think with convincing someone, whether it's Mantic or anyone else, to
Mhm.
pivot, um, is that the data's not there for proof, is it?
Right.
We
No.
can't prove that it doesn't affect growth. You can't prove that,
Mhm.
not unless some company's willing to put their hand up and talk to Mantic, which why would you talk to a competitor like that?
Right.
Um,
Hmm.
yeah. Sean's bringing up basically what we've talked about already, but yeah, I mean, one page rules I feel like is coming up fast. You see
Yeah,
one
and
page rules referenced all the time now in regards
mhm.
to miniatures.
That game is getting better and better every year. Like
Mm,
they know that the game needs improvements, and they're working hard on it.
mm,
And
yeah.
Grimdark Future as an alternative for 40K, it's already there. That game is more fun than 40K in my opinion. My
Mm.
incredibly biased opinion.
Yep. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, I don't like honestly, my understanding is people are loving Firefight. I'm not a sci-fi gamer. Or
Mhm.
what are Mantic calling theirs? Is it Firefight? I think One Page Rules
Yeah,
also call theirs
Firefight's the
Firefight, don't
new army scale one.
they?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a right market. You know,
Mhm.
there's so many people that do not enjoy games of Warhammer 40K. Mhm.
Oh gosh.
Mm. So anyway, yeah. Uh,
Mhm.
so I think we're coming up to 45 minutes, or when we normally finish on the hour. Yeah.
Mhm.
Did you have any other thoughts you wanted to tell us, Param?
I just want to reiterate what I think is the strongest thing in the 3D printing market, and one of the reasons why I'm always wanting new people in the space is selection. And I think people overlook that option when they talk about when we have these talks. It's always about it's going to be this so much cheaper because yeah, the math and the money works out, but if you just look at the options you have in the space, it's insane. That is the biggest
Mm,
advantage 3D printing has right now. Is like, for instance, if you were to go out, I'm going to go completely neutral and go into a different field that's not
mm,
Kings of War. But let's say you're a D&D fan and you want a Loxodon, which is elephant folk. It's a relatively new race in the D&D space. It's not a lot of official elephant folk minis. There are hundreds of elephant folk available in
mm.
3D printing space. And so this space is just going to keep exploding and giving people options. And I know that people like having the official option, and the official options always do well in any space where there's a lot of choice. And that's one of the reasons I think that I would really love to see Mantic in the space.
Well, that's where their IP kicks in, right?
Hmm.
Trident Realms, Night Stalkers, Base
Yeah.
Aliens, Halflings,
Hmm.
hopefully Reforge Orcs done a little bit better, although they're pretty
Hmm.
wow vibe.
Hmm.
It's just they're going in the right direction with IP, I feel, right?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I feel some of it is absolutely killer and isn't
Hmm.
necessarily available. And the
Yeah.
benefit they've got is they've got a
Mhm.
rule set and fluff and armies that already match it. You know,
Right.
like yes, Titan Forge have a game, but like
Mhm.
people are buying Titan Forge for the models, not the game,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
They
Mhm.
have the benefit of the game.
Right. I buy Titan Forge models to play King's War with.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And they're
Um,
already sculpting digitally, and they're showing off digital sculpts in the previews, so they're 90%
Correct,
of the way
right?
there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They are all 3D renders. So,
Hmm.
like to Paul's comment before, it doesn't
Hmm.
take much to go from there to a releasable
Hmm.
STL. You
Just
know?
call Atlas up and say, "Hey, support our stuff." To
Yeah.
put the support, the printable supports on the 3D models. It's the
Yeah.
step you have to do before you can print it.
Mm. Yeah, and of course, Paige's ordering of the Green Lady, but
I
Order of the Green
love
Lady because he
I
loves
love
it.
Green Lady, but
But
it's not
actually, in
original
my
IP.
so I don't think it needs to be a secret. Like I'm putting something together for Mantic for hopefully them to listen to in this. But
Hmm.
like Order of the Green Lady is an awesome example. Like they could make that their
Hmm.
IP and automatically over a few months go, here's your army. You
It's
know?
such a great example that Titan Forge went and did it.
Yeah. Yeah.
They
Yeah.
released a
Yeah.
set that was very obviously Order of the Green
Yeah.
Lady, like
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
Bretonia, Green
Yeah.
Lady.
Yeah. 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 And stunning.
Hmm.
Absolutely stunning. You know? Um, all right. Well, I mean, thanks for sticking your hand up to come on, Peram. I appreciate that, mate. We'll chat a bit more offline, but yeah. And until next time, keep countercharging.